we're back, we're live, we're here on a Monday at noon with Mina, Marco, and me, Mina Morita of the Energy Dynamics consulting firm in Kauai. She's also the former chair of the PUC, and Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar, both joining us by Skype audio from Kauai and from the Big Island. Welcome to the show, you guys. Mina, Marco.
Mahalo,
Hi, Jay.
mahalo, mahalo.
Hi, Marco.
Lots to talk about in energy, always is. We're calling this another chapter in the approval process, but it's really more than that because there's so much going on. I guess the first area we ought to cover is legislation and the tone of the legislature about energy this session, and some of the bills, and what chance they stand at passage. So Mina, you've been writing about it in your blog. Can you talk about it now?
Sure. Overall, well, first of all, given the legislative calendar, bills have to be in their final committee by Friday. Otherwise, they're pretty much dead for the session. But I find the overall tenor of the bills disturbing because a lot of it tries to change PUC decisions or be more prescriptive to the PUC or remove PUC authority. And that's pretty scary because a lot of this will have ratepayer impact, inadvertently raise rates, and a lot of the decisions before the PUC are very technical and have economic impact. So, having this come before the legislature in these bills is really concerning. And a lot of these bills don't have any analysis behind them. For example, there's two bills about putting gasoline and diesel use reductions in law, and which is kind of similar to the 100% RPS law. And again, these bills have no analysis behind them and no substitution fuels available to replace the fuels that you're reducing. So they're not very well thought out right now.
Where are they coming from, Mina?
I think the gasoline diesel reduction target is something from Blue Planet, and it has a lot of support from proponents who are concerned about climate change, and rightly so. But to put aspirational goals in statute is really dangerous.
So are you going to be testifying on some of these bills?
I submitted testimony on House Bill 3044 and it's Senate Bill 3044 and House Bill 2085. And I've been submitting testimony on some of the PUC bills as well.
And the Energy Policy Forum has circulated these bills for vetting by its members, and I know that it has submitted the vetting results to the committees involved.
Right.
One thing you said was it's disturbing, and I recall that when the NextEra merger first came up, there were bills in the legislature that attempted to usurp the power of the PUC to determine the approval process. And I thought that was really troublesome. It happens. The legislature always seems to be vulnerable to bills that usurp power from someone else. For example, there was something in the paper recently about making parking regulations for Kaka'ako. And this is going to be in the legislature? Are you kidding me? The legislature is going to determine parking regulations in Kaka'ako? Really, they must have other things to do. Same thing here with energy. They should leave the PUC to do it themselves. That's what the PUC is for. Anybody disagree with that?
Well, I think, a lot of the decisions that happen at the at the legislature, happen for expediency. But, these kinds of decisions require careful analysis behind them because there are huge consumer impacts. And so they have to be careful on what they consider and how they consider these kinds of legislation that are so complex. Usually, good bills take time to develop, and there are usually working groups, reports that lead to well-developed legislation. But a lot of these bills are strictly reactionary.
Yeah. Marco, you have any thoughts about this?
Yes, I feel that the legislature is. I give them credit for having their hearts in the right place in terms of being well-intentioned, but I largely agree with Mina that transportation, as we've been talking about over the years, in Hawaii has been the most difficult nut to crack compared to power generation as far as becoming more independent, more green, more self-sufficient. And if there were only easier solutions, if it were only as easy as passing a bill, getting it to the governor, having it signed into law with these aspirational goals, but I mean, you need to have a concrete, practical roadmap to get there. Otherwise, it seems to me it's largely just kind of a rhetorical exercise, a feel-good exercise that really doesn't take us much further down the road. And I also agree with Mina's characterization of, and yours, as far as this legislature really wanting to insert itself into areas and domains that are under a PUC jurisdiction. I mean, from the issue of the net public benefit, in other words, perhaps not doing it retroactively, but going beyond fit, willing, and able, and requiring that any such merger, such as the one, for example, of the attempted acquisition of NextEra by NextEra of HEI, that it not only meet minimum criteria, fit, willing, and able, but also demonstrate a net public benefit. So, in a sense, to me, Jay, it's almost kind of a feeling or an action taking place out of a feeling of impotence, relative impotence on the part of the legislature, because they really don't have a whole lot of say statutorily or in a regulatory fashion. Mina can correct me if I'm wrong. In so many of these matters, and I think it's an ambition clearly of a number of legislators, perhaps on both the House and the Senate, that they should be more involved. The people's body should be more involved, and that the PUC should be correspondingly less powerful to decide such weighty and important matters. So, I don't know. Go ahead.
But on the other side, Marco, you bring up some really good points. But on the other side, the legislature has weighed in, and they have weighed in with passing the 100% RPS. Now the thing is getting down into the details, which they are not good at in how to get there.
Well, let me offer this thought, you guys. I mean, what you've both been describing, bills that are aspirational, without detail, without a plan, without analysis, as you said, Mina. Isn't the 100% by 2045 exactly that? How did they get 2045 instead of 2035 or 2055? What kind of analysis went into that? Is that a rational determination? Did they make a plan and make a timeline, or did they just pick that out of the air? Isn't that exactly the same kind of problem?
Exactly, but they passed it. Now it's how do we get there? And everybody is working towards that. So, the basic policy is in place. They did their job with that. Now it's, getting into the details on how do we get there cost effectively? How do we get there addressing equity issues? so they need to let people do their job after they make the broad statement and give the general guidance. Um, so so you don't need the laws that deal in specifics, and that's what they've been doing.
Yeah, well, it troubles me because I mean, it's like throwing it on the wall and seeing if it sticks. You say 2045, then everybody tries to figure out a way to get there, but there was no real analysis to identify 2045 as the target date in the first place. Completely aspirational. I mean, it's like, it's just aspirational. Do you have any thoughts about this, Marco?
Yeah, I happen to believe that the 2045 big hoopla from last year also to be largely aspirational, because, I mean, 30 years out, Jay, 30 years out is practically a lifetime away, and the changes that are happening to this state, to the energy playing field, I think are so dramatic and so unpredictable that, to me, even though the 2045 bill got national press, got quite a bit of coverage to the four corners of the globe, I'm a lot less impressed with things like that as I am, compared to having a concrete plan for the next 4 or 5 years, which means a lot more to me than what may or may not happen now 29 years and not 30. And there's just one other bill I wanted to mention that also kind of caught my eye as being another means of the legislature, or at least people in the legislature, trying to jump into the PUC's territory, which is an effort and a bill. I don't know if it'll make it to crossover in the next week or so, but a bill to reopen net energy metering, expand it, and essentially force the Public Utilities Commission to make a 180-degree U-turn and go back to having net energy metering being the law of the land, so to speak, for the HECO, HELCO, MECO territories. And I have a very strong suspicion I know where that's coming from, and I very much hope that it does not go any further in the current legislature, because I feel that we've embarked. It's been a painful road so far, and it'll continue to be painful for who knows how long to come, but ending them is and was the right thing to do, and going back to it would be a very, very bad move.
Right,
Yeah.
because
Hard to go backward.
Right, and one of the things that Marco and I have written about is the cost implication. So you're benefiting maybe around the 20% of people that have access to the NEM program, but what about the 80% that are not part of the program, but the cost shifts to them as their greater penetration of renewables on the system? You need the system upgrades to accommodate them, but they're not paying into the fixed cost. So all of these issues are so technical with economic impacts, and they can't be legislated.
Well, the other thing it represents, of course, is it's a free country. You can put in whatever bill you want, but this is an example of vested interest trying to get back to a position of their own economic advantage that existed before. They want to return to the good old days, and they're going to put a bill like this in. What troubles me is that I would like to see the energy industry all look for the common good, for the benefit of the community in general, for the society in general. And this bill sounds to me like it is not that at all. It is an attempt to return to vested interests on the issue. But let's move on to the PUC in general, and we have the proceedings began again in February, early February, I guess it was, after a hiatus of about a month or more. And among other witnesses, Marco Mangelsdorf testified there, and I saw that. That was brilliant, Marco. You're a great witness.
Well, you're far too kind, Jay. I was there for several of the 8 days over the past couple weeks that what I call round 2 of the hearings, and despite the wishes of everybody concerned, in terms of wrapping things up last Wednesday, that did not happen. There are still 7 or so witnesses that have yet to be cross-examined, and round 3, let's hear it for round 3. Round 3 will open 2 weeks from today. It's scheduled for the entire week, but I think they'll probably get through those remaining witnesses in 2 or 3 days, and that will hopefully bring to a close the evidentiary hearings and the process in general. The next step being, as I understand it, that there will be a deadline, most likely sometime in March, for the parties, the applicants, the CA, the interveners, to file post-hearing briefs, which I see as kind of closing arguments to the jury, so to speak, with the jury in this case being Randy Awase, Lorraine Akiba, and Mike Champley. And then the 3 commissioners and their staff will chew those tens of thousands of pages, all those documents, days and days and days of evidentiary hearings, and come to a regulatory decision, up or down, on the proposed change of control.
So let me ask you sort of a bifurcated question. I'll ask you both. I'll ask Mina first. Mina, what would you like to see as a matter of policy here in terms of the result, for the benefit of the state? And what do you think will actually happen?
Well, first of all, I hope it's a regulatory decision and not a political decision.
Yes, amen to that.
And I found the second set of the hearing kind of interesting, because you had some philosophical point of views coming through. Why couldn't they do more? Why couldn't they say more? I tend to approach this very pragmatically. Some are going out to bid. I don't see how practical it is, because we're talking about a private company. We're talking about businesses. Unless you remove the franchise and put the franchise up for bid, I don't know how you approach that.
Yeah. Well, one other issue is that after the trouble that NextEra has seen on this, all the stum and the drang over the past year and change, the notion, some people and some commentators have suggested that there would be another company waiting in the wing to take its place and buy Hawaiian Electric. But after what has happened, I think the field must be a lot skinnier now. Who would want to go into a deal like this, knowing all the, the barbs among the roses, the thorns among the roses? It ain't easy to do a merger.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sitting here scratching my head as to, what has this done to the business investment climate in Hawaii?
Yeah.
You can only do business in Hawaii if you're local.
And even then you have a problem.
Well, and the question is, what is local?
Thank you.
Who is local?
Yeah, we've had the Super Ferry, we've had TMT, which is, I think, a goner, and now this, which is, well, I wanted to ask you, is this a goner, you guys? Is this going to happen? I mean, forget about the merits of it, forget about the right thing for the state, but is it likely to be approved right now?
Well, I'm 65% right now that it's going to be approved. But like I said earlier, this has to be a regulatory decision. You got to remove all the politics from it.
Amen. Marco, how do you feel about this? What should happen and what will happen?
I don't think, I certainly hear Mina's position. I respect that, but as far as being able to distill out politics in something as important like this and as massive like this in terms of the change of ownership of one of the oldest, most venerable companies in the state and even before statehood, I just don't think that's possible. I think politics will be a part of the decision-making equation, and that how much is not going to be really quantifiable. But as an intervener on the docket, Jay, I don't want to go out on a limb and give odds or give percentages, but I will say that in the now 21 days of hearings, some of it very lively, very interesting, and other parts of it boring and just incredibly tedious with lawyers asking questions that just kind of infuriated, annoyed everybody. Because I spent a lot of time watching Randy's face as I was in that hearings room, and he's fairly transparent, I think, at times in terms of when he's not terribly pleased. So after 21 days of hearings, some really excellent repartee between the attorneys and certain witnesses, and some really great witnesses and some really much less than great witnesses, I have a hard time seeing how anyone more or less objective or impartial could make a case that NextEra really helped their cause over 21 days of hearings. So if that's true, then it was either more or less neutral to their cause, it didn't help, didn't hurt, or it was detrimental to their cause. And I think I'll just leave it at that. But I just don't think a case can be made. The 21 days of hearings really helped their cause.
Okay. On that note, let's take a short break. We're going to come back and talk about post-NEM and solar and financing issues that are happening locally and on the mainland. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech Hawaii. I hope that you will tune in and watch the show. It is inspiring and uplifting and educational. Also, we talk with artists of all different ilk. We talk with them about what they do, how they do it, and most importantly, most dear to my heart, why they do it. And it never ceases to be fascinating when you get the answer to that question. I hope you'll join us on Center Stage, 2 o'clock Wednesday afternoons. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Stan the Energy Man, Stan Osterman, and I'm here to tell you about my show on Friday, every Friday, on my lunch hour, 12 o'clock till 1 o'clock here on Think Tech Hawaii. We talk about everything energy and anything you ever wanted to know about energy. So we're full of energy, and we'll see you here every Friday at noon to 1. Aloha.
Okay.
Wait, we're back, we're live. We're here with Mina Morita, Energy Dynamics, and former chair of the PUC, and Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar, both joining us by Skype audio from their respective islands, Kauai and the Big Island. So I'd like to go to another area, if you guys don't mind, talk about post-NEM. You mentioned there was a bill in the legislature to try to return it to NEM. I doubt that's going to pass. But how is it? I saw you, Marco, at the EUCI, Hawaii Power Conference a few weeks ago. You spoke there. What is your sense of how post-NEM is doing, and the sense of how that is affecting the solar industry, and furthermore, how things are doing both nationally and in Hawaii about financing for these PV projects?
Sure, Jay. Good, very good question as well. To the first part of your question, I see kind of two main points that I would want to make. One is that even though net energy metering went away as of the 13th of October, so by my calendar that's 4 months ago, and despite that happening, there's continued to be a lot of net energy metering systems still being permitted, still going in. So it's the accumulation of the backlog, essentially, from 2015 that is the fat, as I call it, the fat that many contractors, including my own company, are working our way through. And some companies, I've been told, or some of my colleagues have shared with me, they expect to be busy pretty much all year with sales that were made when NEM was still available. So that's the good thing. The not so good thing, point two, is that under customer grid supply and customer self-supply, which are the two available interconnect agreements now, the numbers to date over the past 4 months have been very disturbing in the sense that they've been very meager, indicating a dramatic drop-off in new sales post-NEM. So if, and this is the big if in capital letters boldface, if these numbers were to continue, and we'll know more, of course, in the months to come, but if they were to continue, it will mean a very dramatic shrinking, if not collapse, relative collapse of the statewide PV industry. So,
Marco, we have some graphics that you sent. You want to go through them?
Sure. And the second, I'm waiting to see it on the screen there so I can speak to the graphics.
Wait,
you know when they're there.
So, Marco, but isn't the slowdown also based on the fact that pretty much everybody has picked the low-hanging fruit, and what you have are customers that are probably, the potential market is now made of the hardest to reach potential customers. And then on top of that, you add the saturation of the grid. It's just not because NEM is going away, it's because all the easy pickings is gone.
And because people are not so excited as they were. It's all gotten more complex and more threatening, if you will, for them to get the same deal that was represented to them a few years ago about how they're going to save all the money. So it's the whole thing is softened from a number of points of view, and so query. Isn't it a combination of factors?
Mina makes a great point, but I'm just not sure to what extent the low-hanging mangoes, ripe mangoes, have fallen from the tree into the basket. Because a year or so ago, I think she and I could have said the same thing, and we both could have agreed, nodded our heads, and saying, yes, the low-hanging fruit have largely been picked. Well, then, lo and behold, after a decrease from 2012 to 2013, then again from 2013 to 2014, there was a 14% bump on Oahu in terms of PV permits issued in 2015 compared to 2014. So I'm reluctant to conclude that definitively the market that all the homeowners, or most of the homeowners, large majority of the homeowners have gone PV. Of those who will go PV, have already gone PV. So I just don't know.
Okay, let's go to those graphics that you sent. We have one spreadsheet about Solar City. What does that mean?
Yeah, and I apologize for the poor resolution, because I saw it on your screen a few moments ago, and it's really hard to read. But I decided, there's a lot of turbulence right now in the solar finance world. The company that led the way in terms of introducing power purchase agreements, more than 10 years ago, SunEdison, and I knew all of the founders of SunEdison. They're no longer any of them involved with the company, but I've known SunEdison since 2004, 2005. They've lost 95+% of their stock value in the past year. They are, I think, at a serious risk of declaring a reorganization bankruptcy almost any day now because of the serious financial bad news that they've been having to endure week after week and month after month. And then you look at more approximately in my market and who I compete against, the likes of Solar City, Sunrun, and Vivint Solar. And I decided, I'm going to go back and look at the numbers, some of the financial numbers of these three companies who've been very active in our state. And Solar City had an earnings call a week or so ago, and they announced their Q4, fourth quarter 2015 earnings, as well as for all of 2015. And they lost a net loss of over $700 million in 2015, which was up from $375 million for all of 2014, which was up from $151 million in 2013. So here you've got a company that has been doing record business, record sales, record revenue, record megawatts, and achieving install costs on average of $2.70 a watt, and yet the more business they do, the more money they lose.
It's just like the old gag about you make it up in volume.
Yeah, except the hole just gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay. What other graphics have you got you want to describe?
Well, the next company that I looked at is Sunrun, and I actually, although I don't have actual data, my hit is that Sunrun is actually has been bigger in the state of Hawaii than Solar City over the past year or two. And Sunrun hasn't announced all of their 2015 earnings yet. We got an earnings call 10th of March coming up in a little less than a month. But at least for the first 3 quarters of 2015, Sunrun lost $150 million, which was up from a loss of $90 million from the first 3 quarters of 2014. So they too, the more business they do, the more systems they sell, the more megawatts they install, the more money they lose. And finally, the last one I looked at, Vivint Solar, which may or may not be purchased by SunEdison, depending on what happens with SunEdison. They haven't even announced any financial information, at least none that I could find, for any parts of 2015. So I'm rather puzzled by that. But in 2014, they lost $166 million. So I'm just scratching my head, Jay and Mina. I'm scratching my head wondering how in the world can this happen? Well, I know it can happen because as long as there's new money being pumped in, whether it's from hedge funds or Elon Musk type people or investors, financial institutions, as long as the new money keeps on coming in, a company can continue to endure losses like this.
Yeah, but that's like Ponzi. You know, the new money pays the old bills. But it's not sustainable. What you are describing is not sustainable. And what I don't understand is why they keep doing it. I mean, have the expenses changed? Have the margins? Well, the margins are negative. Why keep on doing it if the margins are negative?
Well, you know what's really interesting too is, Sunrun went out for financing, and they have this new tool to raise money, and it's securitizing these third-party owner leases. So, like how they bundle mortgages, these guys are bundling these leases as securitized bonds. And so that just came out recently. So it's questionable.
Yeah, and then at the same time, and this is the other topic I'd like to talk with you about, we have 10 minutes left or less, is the whole thing about oil. Oil down to what did I see last time, $27? You know, it's
28.
This is 28. It's not, this is not temporary. It's been going on for months, and it keeps going lower. And it's either a reflection of a slowing in the global economy, or it's a cause for a slowing in the global economy. And certainly, I'm just taking on a logical level, why would I care about renewable energy if classical oil energy is cheaper and cheaper and cheaper all the time? Why would I do that? This has got to be having an effect on A, the global economy, and B, the whole initiative toward clean energy. And maybe those numbers you described, except I can't understand it. Do you understand it?
Well, an interesting thought came to mind today, Jay and Mina, which is, of all the interesting conferences that people propose and actually take place in our beautiful state, what about doing a conference on simply addressing the very simple and super interesting, juicy question, which is, how can we in Hawaii somehow leverage low energy prices, low in terms of oil and natural gas? How can we leverage that to our benefit, to the state's benefit? Wouldn't that be fascinating to get a bunch of people and have talks and seminars on answering that question?
There isn't one obvious answer, just tax it. Tax it.
Well,
impose a tax and take the spread for the benefit of clean energy.
Exactly. And the thing is, this situation is non-existent because you have people like the governor making pronouncements. I mean, that was the reason to look seriously at LNG, because LNG always presents a hedge to oil because it's priced at a 15% discount from Brent. You know, that was one of the attractiveness of LNG. But we can't even have these discussions because of pronouncements that are being made. You know, one of the most serious things Hawaii has to look at is its fuel infrastructure. You know, right now we have a captive fuel infrastructure because the single mooring points are controlled by Chevron and PAR.
Yeah.
So you can't bring in competitive fuel because of the single mooring point system. But the state hasn't been bold enough or committed enough to take on this problem. So yes, it'd be a great idea to look at how we can take advantage of the situation right now. But, you know, you got policymakers that just won't dig into it and do the hard work of really defining what the fuel infrastructure should look like to allow for more competition, to allow for different kinds of fuels to come in.
Well, this goes
Mina,
back to the point you made earlier, Mina, and that is the legislature is not really equipped to deal with the detail of an energy initiative, the detailed planning and tuning and so forth, dealing with new technologies, new ideas, dramatic changes. Somebody had to think that through very carefully. And that should be the PUC. That's the statutory arrangement the way it is right now. And I think they should not be interfered with. They should be empowered to do that.
But the problem with the fuel infrastructure is you're dealing with unregulated companies. So there's a mix of regulated and unregulated companies that deal with fuels. And so who is the point person within government that will do the major planning that needs to go on? And here, I don't think it should be the PUC because, you know, you're talking regulated, unregulated participants.
Well, that raises the question of whether we should take a look at the jurisdiction of the PUC. It seems to be in play anyway. What about giving the PUC greater regulatory authority to cover those parts of the initiative that are not covered now?
Well, I think you have to look at what are the responsibilities right now of the PUC. And, you know, there's definitely a lot of work that the PUC doesn't have to do or shouldn't be doing, you know, like the regulation of transportation. I mean, transportation is basically a deregulated market. You have, when I was there, you had over 600 participants, you know, in property hauling and passenger hauling. When you have that many participants, I don't think you need a regulator.
True. Marco, you have anything on this?
Well, just that, going back to what Mina said a few moments ago, I think, you know, as far as I just still really like my idea in terms of getting people under the same roof, so to speak, to be able to look at this. And, you know, we can invite all kinds of interesting folks, and the way you get people to show up is you allow them to be a panelist and you comp their registration fee. So we do that, and you can organize things and talk to all your influential people over there, Jay and Mina, and we could have one heck of a show.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that's a great idea, Marco, because, you know, for far too long, everybody has been focused on renewable generation, and it's, you know, we did that. You know, we got the market going. But it's no longer just about renewable generation. It's about the entire energy infrastructure. And so your suggestion is a good one to start the conversation and get everybody educated on the challenges out there. regarding the entire energy infrastructure, and especially in Hawaii, it's so integrated. You know, the viability of the refineries, the importation of jet fuel, the importation of gasoline, Hawaii Gas manufacturing of SNG. I mean, they're all interrelated.
Right, we need a larger discussion. And ThinkTech
Yeah.
wants to be there, you know, ThinkTech wants to be there here on Mina, Marco, and me, wants to be there on Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, Wednesday afternoon, 4 to 5. Maybe we could do a panel program about it the way we do every month or two. And maybe the Energy Day program, which I think is scheduled for August. Mina, you're involved in that. Could it enlarge the conversation to cover these, you know, greater landscape, wider landscape issues? And in any event, you know, the thing we set up, created back when David Ige was running for governor, something called the statewide conversation, which we went by Skype to everyone in the state, might be part of this discussion. So I think I'd really like to talk to both of you going forward and try to create a conversation using at least some of those elements to cover, you know, sort of an expansion of the conversation on energy going forward. Now is the time to do it. Anyway, you guys, I think we're out of time. Thank you very much for coming down on Monday for Mina, Marco, and me. Here with Mina Morita of Energy Dynamics, former chair of the PUC, Marco Mangelsdorf of Proficient Solar, joining us both by Skype audio. We'll do this again in 2 weeks, right? It's all set, right?
May we?
Yes.
Fantastic. Yes.
Thank you both. Aloha till
Okay.
next time.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Mina.